So this is just going to be a relatively straightforward discussion. I don't have any notes or anything like that. I have, however, pulled up some references so I can show where I'm coming from. These types of topics I have a very hard time talking about, even in relative isolation. It feels like there's never a genuine sense of privacy, and it makes me feel crazy, frankly, talking about these things out loud. But it is what it is. So, my name is Brandon, and several years ago, nearing 3 years ago at this point, is when I first began to become aware of the greater reality around us. Coincidentally, around in astrology, what is known as Saturn's return. It's around the age of 28, which is the age that I was at that point. And it's supposed to signify a sort of departure into, or rather an arrival into maturity and a new life path, and smacked me like a truck. My nervous system was overloaded. I was very injured. There was a lot of things that happened all at once, and I became very aware of or started to become aware of the greater reality around us and the nature of this realm that we inhabit, which I still don't know what it is, but either way, this is where my journey led me to. So after reading The Law of One, it was the raw transcripts or something like that. I think it's by Don Elkins. I know that the female, what do they call them? The medium, the female medium that conveyed the messages of the supposed raw consciousness or collective was named Carla Ruckert. And keep in mind, just because I talk about things doesn't necessarily mean that I believe them or disbelieve. Okay, I'm just talking about where I've been in my own research. So one of the first things I came across was this Law of One transmission. It's a series of audio recordings that I listen to, at least. It's also in book format, but it was supposed to be the Raw Collective speaking through Carla Ruckert. And then Don Elkins, I think his name was recording it. And I came across something that ended up leading me to understand that not only myself, right, I'm not claiming to be the only one by any means, but I can somewhat interpret the future when I pay attention to my dreams. And I'm not just saying this idly. It's something that I've demonstrated to myself over the last few years and come to realize what I had never seen before. And I'm not saying that I can like blatantly see the future, but kind of like in an interpretative way. I've had this confirmed many times. I started keeping a dream journal at that point because I've always been a lucid dreamer. But I started really delving into what's possible. Either way, this particular part of the raw transmissions, I don't even really want to say what it was because it feels narcissistic or something. But it set me on this path to try and understand not necessarily who I am, but what I am. Because I think that's an important question that we all want answered at some point. And that's kind of, coincidentally, what the Saturn's return in astrology is all about. So I set off on learning, physics, astrology, astronomy, history, cult history, comparative mythology, all sorts of stuff. And I'm still learning, but I learned pretty quickly. And I've made a fool of myself on several occasions and had to reframe my own thinking and apologize and restart from ground zero and so on and so forth. Because while I was learning all of these things, one of the foremost lessons that I learned is that this place is devious. It is full of trickery. I'm not saying we live in hell or anything like that. I'm not one of those people. I think this place is a little bit of everything. But one of the things about it is that it is certainly devious. Like, it will trick you if you let it, if you become too attached to things. So anyway, I learned about this concept of the dying and rising God pretty early on. I didn't really know why I was so attracted to it, but I was, and I still am. It's arguably like the key. It's the key to understanding so many frameworks of belief and religion throughout the world. Really is the dying and rising God, but not just that. It more so revolves around a cult belief of the Cabeiri, who I've talked about at great length on my channel. It's most of the esoteric stuff that I have uploaded at this point, in one way or another, discusses the Cabeiri, and that's just one name for them. They had many names. The seven sages of Greece. Uh, that's just what would be the correct word for it. Basically, where they turn it into a sort of like legitimate history, make them into actual like historical characters. I can't think of the name for it. Kind of like humanistic in a way. The Apkallu, which is like the sages of Mesopotamia. The Saptarishis, which is the sages of Hinduism, or India, I suppose. The Cabeiri, which were also known as the Great Gods. It's one of the translations of the Cabeiri, what it's thought to mean is the Great Gods. The Cabeiri were the sons of Enmeshara, so just another group, the Great Gods. The Corybantes, the Dioscuri, Penates, they have many, many, many names. The Ameshaspinta of Zoroastrianism. In Revelation, they pop up as the seven spirits of the seven spirits of God, like the seven spirits that surround the throne or whatever have you. There's many different versions of these entities, but that greatest of them, so-called, is Eshman. So when I learned my own astrology, right now this is set to my birthday, and this is why I pulled this stuff up, so that you can see where I'm coming from and see where I've been in the message that I generally am trying to share, I guess. Still working on it, but so when I started to learn astrology, I learned pretty rapidly that this character, Ophiuchus, this is my own birth chart, or the snapshot of the sky, rather, when I was born. This character, Ophiuchus, is known variously as Asclepius, Apollo, Archangel Michael, but perhaps most prominently Eshman. Right? And on the day that I was born, on December 2nd, keeping in mind that there's a difference between tropical and sidereal astrology, if you actually want to know what the sky looked like when you were born, you need to take a look at something like this. You're going to have to take a look at something like sidereal astrology. Otherwise, you're looking at a blatantly incorrect system, which is what like 90% of people, at least in Western countries, do. They use tropical. So after I went through that whole debacle and learned that I was using the wrong system, I re-looked, or took another look rather, and saw that this is the snapshot of the sky when I was born. So this character, Ophiuchus, is Eshman. He's the dying and rising god of the Cabeiri. It took years for me to put this all together. I mean, I'm talking like every day, all day, hammering it out, following the intuition, listening to dreams, studying. This is a paper from John Yarker. He was the international grand master of the Memphis, or the Rite of Memphis Mizraim, of Freemasonry, which goes up to like 99 or 365 degrees or whatever have you. It's one of the speculative branches of Freemasonry that delves further into the mysteries than you would get from like your typical Blue Lodge, or even the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. This is one of the deeper branches, if you will. In this paper, he generally gives a dissertation on the arcane schools, as you can see, outlines elements of the Golden Dawn and Ordo Templi Orientis initiations, which is like Aleister Crowley type stuff. You can start to see how all of these organizations weave together. Anyway, John Yarker, in this particular paper, discusses Eshman, establishes the blatant link. He says, according to Sanchoniath on the Phoenicians, the Cabeiri were the 8 sons of Sadiq, of whom the youngest, named Eshman, or Achman, or in the Greek version, Cadmilus or Casmilus, was slain by the others. Okay, so just as a quick reference, so that you can see Robert G. Mackey, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. I am not a Freemason. I'm not in any sort of group. Okay, let me just put, I'm not in any sort of group whatsoever. Standalone guy. But you gotta study this stuff to understand it. So, there is much perplexity connected with the subject of these mysteries, but it is generally supposed that they were instituted in honor of Attis, the son of Cabeiri or Demeter, of whom Cadmillus was but another name. They represented in the person, the mysteries, they represented in the person of Attis, or Cadmillus, the enigmatical death of the sun in the winter and his regeneration in the spring. The Cabeiric death was in fact a type of the Heramic. Okay, so on and so forth. So, I've already uploaded these videos discussing these elements before, but I'm showing here why I found it, why it stuck out to me so much, how I found it, because all I did was finally stop being an idiot. Take a look at things like astrology, one of the oldest sciences of mankind, instead of dismissing it. I was in the military. I was one of those guys. I was like, astrology. What does that got to do with me? I was not the type of person, but Saturn's return came along, and here I am. So I realized that I was born underneath this constellation. It drove me to want to understand this character more. Specifically, Antares, the sun aligns with Antares every year around December 2nd. When I was born, it was 5 degrees north of Antares, within a single degree, like less than a single degree, so 0 point something. So the sun was aligned with Antares. Then I came to find that Antares, from one of the preeminent Assyriologists, right? In reference to Antares, you have this female deity, Nansekila the Pure Queen. Under the last title, which is Nansekila the Pure Queen, she was wife of her son Nesu, dialectic Lisi. The god Nesu is known almost entirely by his star Antares in Scorpio, which was also identified with Nebo. Okay, so maybe by this point, hopefully, you're starting to see the pattern here of this entity, right? This entity that is associated. Now, Nesu, known almost entirely by his star Antares in Scorpio, the myth of the mother goddess and her son and husband who died yearly and descended for a time to the underworld to be rescued and restored to his wife and mother generally appears in Sumerian and especially Babylonian religion, Eric in the cult of Anuni and Dumuzi, Ishtar and Tammuz, but the older form of this myth in Sumerian seems to have been associated with the cult of Ninhursag, Oruru, and her son and husband Nesu. Okay, so now having added that little bit, Man the Mortal One, down here, Man the Mortal One, whose life, blood, and flesh sprang from a god himself, walks forever in the shadow of death, as does his divine brother, the god Lil or Nesu. Now, as you saw, the star Antares is also associated with Nebo or Nabu, right? In the Old Testament, Moses climbs atop Mount Nebo, and that's where he dies. I've made a mistake before and said that's where he was buried. Nobody knows where his body was, but that's certainly where he died, and that's where he viewed the Promised Land, having been restricted from entering it, was atop Mount Nebo. I've also covered this in previous videos, but in the Mountain of the Harmode, or Mountain of the Assembly, I believe was the paper, they discuss the relationship between Moses and Nabu, how Nabu, or Moses, is called Navi multiple times, which is cognate with Nabu. It just means, prophet or seer or whatever have you. And being the lawgiver, being the one who holds the tablets of destinies and so on and so forth, this Thoth or Mercury character, keeping in mind that Moses, another video I've uploaded, right, was specifically referred to in several ancient, we're talking about pre-Christian sources, was referred to specifically as Hermes, okay, which is the character of Nabu, which is the character of Casmillus or Eshman. And so that's why I'm covering all of this right now, because this is what I found looking into my own astrology. This is how I found all of this, so on and so forth. Okay, so it doesn't seem to me to be a coincidence that Antares takes place, or it stands right at the crossing of the Milky Way. You see this, the ecliptic that I've outlined here, intersecting, forming that tau or crossing point or cross with the Red Sea that is the Milky Way. You know, that's that fucking like "let my people go" type shit. There it is. There it crosses right here between Sagittarius and Scorpius, and opposite between, I want to say, Gemini and Taurus. Let's see if we can look real quick. Sometimes this thing's a little finicky. Where is it? Taurus and Gemini. Yeah. So there's another one. Alright, so trust me, I didn't find all of this immediately. It took years, like I said, of me making a fool of myself, of having to go through various explanations and, I mean, just thousands of hours of research. But yeah, so it doesn't seem to me to be a coincidence that this all seems to tie in right at the crossing of the Red Sea, that is the Milky Way. The cross, right? Jesus died on the cross, or crossing. That's why I tried to, in a previous video, say that, or mention that Antares is known as Masu, has the reading of Masu, which is directly connected to the name of Moses, right? But it's also connected to the Mashu mountain in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you have to descend at the gates of the Scorpions. You have to descend through the Mashu mountain across like the ocean of death or whatever have you, to reach Dilmun, to reach paradise. And that's a very brief explanation. There's a larger process that outlines it, but that's the general theme here, is that you have this mythical mountain, which, again, the Cabeiri, all of these entities are associated with. You have this mythical mountain through which you reach, after crossing the waters, you reach Dilmun, or heaven. Now, Nabu, right, again, coming back to this Mercury character who's associated with Antares, Nabu is specifically associated with this character named Inshak. So how can I best outline this? This star, as you saw, known as Nesu. Let's go back to the known as Nesu, dialectic Lisi, also identified with Nebo. Okay? Ninsakila, the pure queen, was the wife. So they are said, just like Eshman, who is supposed to be the 8th of the Cabeiri. There's many different versions of all of this. 1 second. Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on, buddy. I need you to be quiet while I'm doing this, right? There you go. There's a good man. Alright. There's many different versions of this, but it always revolves around these 8. Lisi, or Lyson, and Ninsakila are said to be the parents of 8 children in one version. But Ninsakila specifically, it relates to this holy paradisical land of Dilmun, which is said specifically to be a prototypical Garden of Eden. Pancake, don't do it. Don't do it. Hey, don't do that. It's said specifically to be a paradisical Garden of Eden. Coincidentally, or non-coincidentally, Freemasonry, right, 33, it's said to be composed of like 33 an additional 33 artificial islands. So a small archipelago of 50 natural islands, Bahrain, and an additional 33 artificial islands. Right? And that's not a coincidence with this whole Freemasonic thing. So specifically in Dilmun, there's this character Insak, right? The Lord of Dilmun. Insak, written in dedication inscriptions, Insak was the god of Dilmun. He is the Nabu of Dilmun specifically. I don't feel like jumping through 5 million different sources, but hopefully you can see where I'm coming from with this. Inzak is the last of these deities right here, born from Enki and Ninhursag. Inzak shall be Lord of Dilmun, Lord of Paradise. He is specifically known as the Nabu. So Ninsakila was the spouse of Inzak of Dilmun. So what you can take from this is that there is this recurrent theme revolving around these chthonic, Cabeiric deities. And as I've said, in the Dying and Rising God, the Lord of Dilmun, or whatever you want to call him, the mediator between man and God, so on and so forth. I'm not saying that it's the exact same all over the place. No, what I'm saying is that the theme remains. That's why I said that this is the key, the Cabeiri, in these mystery cults, to understanding the archetypal belief systems of humanity at large, which is quite the fucking statement. Very significant. And it's a very long and in-depth study that I'm still undergoing. But this is how I came to see all of it, was simply by looking, right? As above, so below, right? Just by waking out of my own ignorance and finally taking a look. Now, my father, stepfather, but he was the man that raised me from the time that I was 2 years old. He was named Aaron, and he was a great man. He passed away, unfortunately, a couple years ago at a very young age, at 46. But he was the best man that I ever knew. And if I talk about him too much, so I'll just continue. From him, I inherited this. Obviously, this is on Wikipedia, but I have from him the one thing or two things that I inherited. One of them was this portrait of Prometheus bound by Peter Paul Rubens. The other was a series of coins, 3 silver coins from the early 1920s United States, that all feature the Liberty figure wearing a Mithraic cap. Let's see, United States, silver dollar, Mithraic or Phrygian cap. Let's see if I can find it real quick, just so I can show you an image. Boom, this one right here. I inherited 3 of these. Oh wow, that's even more pronounced, isn't it? Look at that. So yeah, look at this one. It's funny because over time you can see that they like gradually phased out the Phrygian cap. But anyway, so I inherited from Aaron this picture of Prometheus when he passed away a couple years ago, and these coins with this Mithraic cap. Now, this figure of Fucus is, why does it want to do this? This is Prometheus. I've discussed this elsewhere in the other videos, right? You have the eagle Aquila, which eats the liver of Prometheus. You have Hercules right here, which shoots Aquila. You have the arrow Sagitta right here, which is the arrow that Hercules uses upon freeing Prometheus, right, by shooting Aquila. You have the chains or the serpent of life and death that binds Prometheus. It's all right here in the sky. It's all right here in the sky. And I'm not the only one that's seen it before. So, last but not least, or not even last, but for off the top of my head, this character is known as Casmillus, like I showed. Cadmillus. Right? So the name of Cadmillus this is from Frederick von Schelling. He's talking about the divinities of Samothrace, which you can see here. He comes to be known as Casmillo, or Cadmillo, or Camillo. I swear to God. 1 second. So hopefully this doesn't become corrupted, having had to have paused the audio. But yeah, so as you can see here, Cadmillo, Camillo. So this is the name of my biological father and biological grandfather. Not that I knew them, either of them, very well. It's not my name, but funny enough, it's the name that I called myself when I was I want to say I was like 12 or 13. I used to tell my friends that my secret name was Camillo. So, you know, make of it what you will, I guess. It's just interesting. Like, okay, anyway, now that you can see what I see, hopefully, at least I've shown it. I know a lot of this takes a lot of background to understand, a lot of research on its own, and I know that a lot of people are very dedicated towards their own religions and don't even necessarily want to understand things like this. But it is what it is, and it's not going to change or go away. For those that have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, what I've come to find, what I try to convey on my channel, is that this world is not this. This world that we inhabit is not this. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it's presented as something that it's not. But there's so many things going on that are so strange. You know, whether it be the absolute corruption of the banking system, whether it be the absolute corruption of the education system, whether it be this obvious movement towards the phasing out of humanity in general with AI. Doesn't seem like they're trying to uplift humanity into a golden age with it. It seems like they're trying to take the other route, because that's the two routes you have. You have people are relieved of their labor and allowed to, you know, self-actualize, or you have people are reduced to servitude, even more so than has already been accomplished. You know, they lose their value through the introduction of this AI. So, you know, there's all of these UFO psychological operations going on, all of these various things that have been coming to light. Obviously, COVID and the whole nonsense with that debacle. It's a very strange time to be alive, to say the least. And not the least of which, this is not true. Like, the very image of the place that people live is completely and utterly false. So, I don't know. What I can say is that if there was ever a time to wake up for humanity, to wake up from its ignorance, before you are forced to experience, I know, something unspeakably terrible, frankly. If there was ever a time for people to drop their preconceived notions, to let go of their childish beliefs, to stop taking everything as a matter of faith, to finally start paying attention to themselves and their own thoughts and their own surroundings and these systems that have been built up around them, to finally come together and to see the greater picture, then now would be that time. The first Hermetic principle is that all is mind. And I truly believe that. I've seen it. And, I don't want to say that I believe it because I try to stay away from that, right? It seems to be true from what I've experienced. Not just belief, but my actual experience seems to be true, that all truly is mind. I don't know how else you can make sense of moving a material body via pure thought and will. I don't know how you can make sense of an obvious intelligent design without placing it in the framework of some sort of cosmic mind. I don't know how you can make sense of creating entire worlds out of dream substance that take on form without looking at it this way. The synchronicities in life and so on and so forth. Like, life is a synchronicity that doesn't even begin to make sense. There is no explanation, no logical explanation for how anything, any single thing, actually works. You can try and break it down, and what happens? You end up with the same answer. It doesn't make sense. There is no explanation. I think a good start, though, is looking at it all like it's in the framework of the mind. All is mind. So if your mind is occupied with meaningless toil, then there it is, right? That's, while I'm not religious, nor would I wish that upon anybody, the majority of people are, unfortunately, and they will fight to the death over these false beliefs that have been given to them by other people. The thing is that there is one text called the Hypostasis of the Archons. It's a Gnostic text, and it specifically states our situation. It states that mankind is made to be busy with toil, to weary themselves with toil, and to be, to have their attention diverted from anything else, to enslave themselves with work. And you can see that it's the truth. It was certainly the truth for me before I had the chance to finally sit down and breathe and see. So, one last little note. Ironically, all religions are given from God in the framework of understanding God as everything, right? Because I think that that's, at least at this point, it's the most logical understanding that I have, is that God is every single thing, the good, the bad, the ugly. God is everything. So on the one hand, you have all religions are God-given. On the other hand, you have every lie that was ever told is God-given. It's a very interesting paradox there. Okay, I don't know. I'm just going to leave it off there. Hopefully I've explained myself, explained what I'm trying to get at here, why I've arrived here. I hope that humanity can someday end up in a genuine golden age where we can all come together and we can all learn to respect each other and to see past such stupid ideas as blindly adhering to a particular faith and killing others because of it, looking at people based on skin tones, looking at people based on politics that don't even involve you, for fuck's sake, looking at nationalities that don't even exist, all of these crazy mental concepts that have enslaved humanity. I hope to see a day where we can overcome these things and we can overcome greed and we can finally just let ourselves be happy for once. So, much love.